think about what we really mean when we say the word talent. And if you force yourself to write down on a piece of paper in a sentence that ends with a period, talent is, it's really hard to actually fill in, like, what do I mean? Potential, I mean, we start to use metaphors. Here's my definition of talent, and I think it reveals that I do think it's important. Talent is the rate at which you increase in your skill with effort. Some people are going to increase their skills faster than others, and I think it's legitimate to say, those are the quick studies, those are the talented people. I think it's legitimate for Google to look for them, right? Why not? Why not try to hire the more talented people? But in my data, I find two things. One is that more talented individuals don't always keep showing up, right? Woody Allen famously once said, 80% of success in life is just showing up. He was later asked by William Safire of the New York Times how he got to the number 80. And Woody Allen, who is not exactly a scientist, said, well, I was going to say 70, but it had one extra syllable. Nevertheless, 70, 80, 60, I think his point is that his experience as a writer, which was the context of the quote, there are many people who could write a great book or who are talented in the sense that when they write, they get better faster, but they never finish what they begin. And so what I find in my data is that talent is no guarantee of actually showing up and finishing the things that you start. The second thing is, characteristic of high achievers, really in any domain, whether it's Google or outside Google, is this kind of daily discipline of trying to get better, right? Just, in sometimes, microscopic, infinitesimally trivial ways, like all those little details add up to excellence. And it's not always the people who are the quick studies who are willing to put in those hours and hours of behind the scenes, unglamorous work. So sure, Google should hire talented people, but I do believe that you want people who are going to stick with things when they're hard, and who are going to daily submit themselves to the Japanese principle of Kaizen, continuous improvement.
So on that subject, continuous improvement, you talk in the book about practice and the difference between, I think you use the words directed practice versus regular, undirected practice. And it reminded me of, I think in running, there's a phrase junk miles, which maybe indicate, I've never actually been a runner, so I can only hypothesize what it means, but I guess it means kind of running that doesn't really contribute to your improved conditioning. And what is the difference between directed practice and undirected practice in the spirit of Kaizen and self-improvement?
So let's take running as actually the perfect example. So when I started to try to understand, the science of achievement, right? Beyond bumper sticker wisdom, what do we really know as a science about experts and how they got that way? I quickly found myself at the doorstep of Anders Ericsson, who's the world expert on world experts. He studies what experts do that make them different from the rest of us, right? It's a great job. He goes to like the Sudoku tournaments and he studies, World Cup soccer players, and he refers to it actually as deliberate practice, and he would like to say that deliberate practice is different from anything else that we do to running. So when I heard about this research on deliberate practice, I asked Anders, why is it that I have gone running pretty much every day for years, and I'm not a second faster than I ever was, right? Isn't that evidence that you're wrong, that it's not thousands and thousands of hours of practice? He started asking me questions like, well, when you go out for a run, do you have a goal, like a certain time, right? Or are you trying to run, hills and so? No, I'm taking the same route, every time I go out around my neighborhood. And he said, okay, well, that's great. What do you do when you're running? I was like, well, I listen to NPR and, any other podcast because I'm trying to distract myself. And he said, well, that's interesting because people who are trying to improve their running are actually concentrating on their running and their strides and their breathing. All right. And he said, so how are you getting feedback on your running? I mean, are you keeping your times? Are you measuring your heart rate? Do you have a coach who's looking at your form? No, and no, right? And then he said, are you going back every time when you run and thinking to yourself, what can I refine here, right? Before this next repetition, what is there that I can do differently? No. And he said, well, then I can tell you why you're not getting any better at running. And that is, those thousands of hours are not thousands of hours of deliberate practice. So I think this idea that, we should be getting better at things, we can unpack that a little. It's not just going out and trying hard. It's actually trying hard in those 4 very specific ways.